Good afternoon, Sioux Falls and everyone here. I'm Rex Rolfing, and I'm starting the meeting for Councillor Greg Jamieson, who is on his way here to begin the meeting for Audit, the Audit Committee meeting on February 12th, 2014, and we welcome everybody here in the audience and everybody on Channel 16 and those that may be streaming in via their computer. I would, let's see, we can't conduct any business at this point because we do not have a quorum, so what I'm going to do is, what's the word? Not adjourn, but recess. Reset. We're going to recess the meeting until Councillor Jamieson is here, which should be very quickly, and that will, Ann Applegard is here, so we have a quorum and we can conduct business. And I know at least one of them is coming, and we'll be here very quickly. So this meeting is in recess until that point. Thank you. You're in resource, so you started it? Yeah. Thank you. We'll return out of recess and back into, call the meeting back to order.
Rich, I guess we want to start off with approval of the minutes. Anybody? We have a motion to approve, and it's been seconded to approve the minutes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. Very good. We'll start off with our reports. Rich, we'll go with item number A, leaf drop-off, cash handling.
Okay. Our newest auditor, Jess, will handle the overhead. And this audit was at the request of management, and management is here. If after Kim gives a little overview, if there's any questions, they're available for answering any questions the committee might have. So, Kim, you want to?
Sure.
Okay.
As Rich said, we did the audit of the cash handling processes at the leaf drop-off sites at the request of management. They were aware that internal controls could be strengthened, so it was kind of a collaboration between us to kind of come up with some ideas. We have 2 sites. They're typically open from the last week in September through the end of November. Annual revenue taken in from these sites ranges from approximately $40,000 to $50,000 a year. They are open 7 days a week, and it's a flat cost of $2 per car or truck to use the drop-off site, and they do not allow commercial vehicles in. Each site is staffed with 2 seasonal city employees. They are out there, they collect fees, and they do a manual tracking of the number of cars using the sites throughout the day for management analysis, and they also prepare the daily deposit to be picked up from Rochester. We did do a site visit to each of the leaf drop-off sites to view the process and oversee the cash handling processes. The results of the audit, we noted no instances of misappropriation in our analysis, and we also noted that management's very active and continually monitoring the program for areas of improvement. We did come up with 2 recommendations. The first recommendation is that we recommend enhancing the physical safety of cash at the leaf drop-off locations because they are not in an area where cash can be stored in one of the city buildings. They leave them at their shack, for lack of a better term. They do leave a small amount of cash there overnight in their cash box. So we're working with management and suggesting some enhanced physical safety. They were on board with that. Going to evaluate reducing the amount of cash on hand, and also plan to work with Armored Car to see if they can pick up later in the day to reduce that amount as well. The second recommendation was that management review the daily deposits to the daily car count to ensure that we are collecting $2 per car, and require staff to note any discrepancies on that count. And we also recommended that finance continue to review the daily deposits to ensure that the amount that's being deposited in the bank matches what's filled out on the deposit slip by the staff. Management also agreed with this. They provided a detailed response, which is included in the report. But it sounds like they are reviewing the daily deposits to the car count. I think the main key here is to add an exception column to explain if there was an instance where they didn't collect a fee or something happened where that would be off. And management also concurred, like what I said before, to work with Armored Car to pick up later in the day, and also to work with finance to find ways in the new financial software to streamline the process. Overall, the audit went very well. I think we were able to sit down and share some ideas that will contribute to the continued success of the program, and I think management's doing a good job too about continually looking for areas to improve. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them, or we do have management present as well.
Any questions for Kim? Yes.
I just have one, and I'm not sure of the mechanics of how it works, but I read, it's hard. You don't have enough people to segregate duties for the internal control and so forth. But is it possible where, and I'm not sure how they count the cars too, but could you use some kind of methodology where the person who takes the cash gives a receipt, which counts the cars too, and then they have to show it to the other person, and that way you got both people in on the
Yep.
verification,
And
or maybe that's what they do, I don't know.
I think I'll let Trent or Dave speak to that. They have implemented a computer system, and I think they've tried receipts in the past, and customers don't want them because it's a $2 fee. You know, they don't want to take a receipt, but I know they've looked at different things with that, so.
Sure. Trent Lubers with the Office of Public Works. I think that is something we've tried. We've actually used our landfill software, our scale software. Customers don't want the receipts. Also, if you're familiar with how the sites work, it really jams things up. People come like on a Saturday, that type of thing, and so we can have a backlog out onto Lions Boulevard, that type of thing, and so trying to make the operation run fluently with just a couple of people and still minimize our risk is what we were trying to do. We've looked at like a 2-ticket system where you just hand out a ticket when they give the cash as opposed to a receipt, and then they give it at the face of the drop-off site, things like that. And we're considering those things yet. We'd really like to take a look at the technology side, the computer, where it doesn't necessarily give them a receipt, but it helps us with the counts as far as cars coming in. So,
Thank you.
Councilor Rolfing.
Two things real quick. First thing that comes to mind is one of those counters that the street department has. That would be pretty easy to count the tires, you know, they'd count it every day and you'd know pretty quick how many are in there, except for when you got trailers and you got 3, but you know, should be a way to get around that. That might be an idea for you to look at.
we actually talked about that last fall going in. We just didn't get it implemented going into the fall season, but it's one of the options that we looked at going into the season when we were looking at ways to minimize our risk. Quite honestly, we just didn't get it implemented before the season started.
So it's not a dumb idea. That's pretty good. I came up with an idea that might work. Secondly, the one that not bothers, but concerns me more is the amount of money that's out there and not being able to get out there and get that. Are we looking at any way to get that taken care of with management going out there once a day or whatever and collecting it and depositing or whatever?
We do have armored car pickup, so any traffic that comes after that armored car pickup, which is why we're trying to delay that, and then we also want to leave ourselves enough cash to do business the next day to make change. And so we certainly have ways to secure the cash out there. I don't want to get into a lot of details as far as how we do that, but we are looking at better ways to secure the cash so that it's not an attractive target for anyone.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Trent, if I could, the cost of operating, this is maybe off base here a little bit, but while you're here and we're talking about the cost of operating or managing those leaf drop-off sites, how many people are we talking? How much equipment and how much what I'm trying to figure out is how much expense do we have in operating those?
I can't give you, I don't know if Dave can give you a specific example of expense. I know that we generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000 worth of revenue. There's usually 2 temporary employees there. We stack it, and then street department in the off season in the wintertime when they're not hauling snow, haul the leaves out to the landfill. But Dave can give you some specific costs.
It's pretty much a wash. It's pretty much a break even, a cost of service. Again, we generate $40,000 to $50,000 in revenue, and probably one of the biggest factors is the transportation of getting those leaves back out to the landfill to compost them. So we have, I think, approximately 20 to 25,000 in labor costs and expenses, and then approximately 30 to 40,000 in transportation costs. So.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's what I want to get to. Rich, anything you need to add for that?
Well, we didn't put it in the report. We just had a brief discussion. Should we even charge for it? And we decided we probably should. It's an enterprise fund. It's supposed to cover the costs or try to. That's an option. Just make it free. But I think our opinion, management and auditors, that we weren't going to go down that road. But that'd be one solve. That'd solve the problem. But then you still have that expense that you're not. At least you're recovering about $50,000 in expenses. So.
Right. Go ahead, Trent.
If we can speak to that. This is a service that we essentially cover the cost with the revenue that we have. The people who use it are paying for it, and the people who don't aren't. And if you build it into the tipping fee or the other revenue mechanisms for the landfill, then you're essentially generating revenue for the cost of running that operation that people aren't using. So.
All right, very good. And hope you get well soon with your arm.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's a big wave.
Yeah, for a while. So, thank you.
All right, well, very good. Thanks, Kim. And any other final questions on that audit report? Take a motion to accept that audit.
So moved, Forbes.
Forbes.
Second, Rolfing.
Thank you very much. That's been moved to approve. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Great. We'll go on to the next report, the financial condition analysis. Rich?
Yeah, we've done this similar type of report, I think, twice now in the last 7 years. We're looking at the what we call the CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And each municipality, wherever they're at in the country, they have to do this CAFR. That's the standard term. In other words, they have to have their audited financial statements in a certain format. And so the advantages of looking at our CAFR and then maybe comparing it to comparison cities is you're looking at audited financial statements that are prepared in a consistent way across the country under generally accepted accounting principles. This analysis is independent of management. They have their own analysis, which is included in the CAFR in that introductory section. It's called the Management Discussion and Analysis. But this would be just our perspective as auditors. Now, the limitations of doing this analysis is historical. We're not projecting what the condition of the city will be a year from now or 5 years from now. It's a broad overview. It's not detailed analysis. And we're not making an attempt to measure service quality or service level. We're just looking at the finances. We did some research on various financial indicators, ratios, and we picked several that we thought were useful. There's many that you could pick from. You could probably come up with 20 different sort of ratios that you could kind of play with the numbers, but we thought these were useful. On page 3 there, we looked at the short-term solvency. We thought people would be interested in that. You can measure the current ratio. You're looking at the current assets compared to the current liabilities, kind of what's your short-term position. A good benchmark is about a 2-to-1 ratio or better, where your assets are twice as big as your liabilities or better. As you can see, we're very, very good on the current ratio. In 2012, it was 7.7. In other words, the assets were almost 8 times more than the liabilities. And certainly no warning trend. Liquidity well exceeds the benchmark. Next, on the bottom of page 3 there, we looked at something called service flexibility. We looked at the debt service ratio. In other words, are you spending more and more money just for debt service and you have less money available for operating costs? We calculated that for the government funds, and we found that the ratio we came up with was steady and it was low. So what that would suggest is that we have sufficient resources available for operating expenditures and capital outlay. And the debt service payments are not consuming a very large portion of the financial resources. For the governmental funds, it was, as you can see there in 2012, was like 0.08, so it's very low. Capital asset condition, looking at how does the city maintain its capital assets, our infrastructure and that sort of thing. And the way it's calculated is you go to the accumulated depreciation figures in your financial statements, and you look at the capital assets being depreciated, and you come up with a ratio. And then you should subtract that ratio from 1 to come up with this number. You want that ratio to be high. If it's low, that means you're probably not maintaining your capital assets. It would suggest that anyway. And as you can see, the results are extremely consistent going back the last 10 years. It's always about 0.66 or 6.7 or 6.8. It's just very, very consistent, and it's fairly high. So that would suggest that the city's investing in capital assets and doing so very consistently. So that's good. Next ratio was dependency. Some local governments are very, very dependent upon state or federal sources for their operating or their capital needs. So the measure is trying to figure out how dependent are we on other government sources. And we came up with the ratio, you divide the total intergovernmental revenue by the total revenue. And we came up with that ratio of, it's very consistent, it's about 0.10 or 10% or even less. So we thought that was good. It's been very steady. It would suggest that we're not really reliant upon the federal or state government. Typically it'd be the health department, transit, and community development that would get a lot of those federal monies, but certainly it's not a huge part of our revenue, so indicate that we're not overly dependent. Now, if that money were to dry up, let's say for some reason we didn't get that transit money, or we didn't get the health department money, we'd obviously have to change the programs that are funded by that, but certainly would not be a crisis situation. Top of page 5, we looked at the long-term solvency. We looked at that short-term solvency. This is looking at the long-term. We came up with the long-term liabilities ratio, and that high ratio would suggest that the organization has less ability to pay debt compared to an organization with lower ratio. And for this one, we start looking at the comparison cities, which we named the very last page of the report. We listed those. You want to put that on the screen there? On page 9, we had the 10 comparison cities, and we used the same cities that the finance department had used recently for one of their reports. They're commonly used comparison cities for other departments when they're presenting reports to the city council, basically other large cities in the upper Midwest. So if you go back to that page 5 there, that long-term solvency, the average of the comparison cities was 0.3. Our ratio was 0.1 up until 2012, and then it went up to 0.2. So we're still less than the average of the comparison cities. Now, I think the reason it jumped up a little bit was because we incurred the debt with the event center. So that's going to obviously affect that ratio, because that was a significant debt that we have. On the same line, that debt per capita, the next indicator, that's found in the CAFR. That's reported in all the CAFRs of the comparison cities and for Sioux Falls. You can see that's the amount of debt that the city has compared to the population, and you come up with per capita per person. You'd think, well, that's a lot of money that each citizen owes $2,500 for the city debt. The comparison cities were more than that, so we're still lower than the average. It's definitely been creeping up, certainly starting in 2007 when we incurred the debt for Lewis and Clark, and then when we went to and we had the event center when that was passed by the citizens. So definitely going up. It's still in what I would consider the moderate category. I don't think it's cause for alarm, but it's certainly something that this council and future councils keep an eye on, is how much debt we're getting into. Next page, on page 6, ability to withstand fiscal stress. I think this is, the council's familiar with this. They set a target of 25%. We want to finish the year, our fiscal year is the calendar year, December 31st. We want to have a reserves of 25% in the general fund, assets compared to the expenditures for the year. And we've always hit that target the last 10 years. You can see we've always been, looks like about at least 30%. The target's 25 or greater. We haven't had any trouble hitting that. It's been consistently very high. And you can see the comparison cities, they're at about, the average of the comparison cities, they're at about 26 or 27%. So we're above the average of our comparison cities. We're well above our target, so that would indicate we have the ability to withstand fiscal stress. The benchmark is usually a good benchmark is 16%. That'd be 2 months. You figure 1 month's about 8% of the year, so 2 months would be 16%. We're certainly well above that benchmark, so that's good. So and then the last thing I figured was on page 7 there, I thought people might be interested in, we use that second penny, for debt service, for a lot of our debt service. And, well, what's the percentage of the second penny that we're using for debt service over the last 10 years? And you can see it kind of jumps all over the place, anywhere from, I think in 2007 it was really low, but the other years it's anywhere between 21 and 35%. Just for more interest of people. And we still have quite a bit of room in the second penny. It's certainly not the majority of what the second penny is being used for. So overall, I conclude we're in good financial shape on the basis of the financial indicators that we used. We're doing well in comparison to the 10 comparison cities. Obviously, the story here is long-term debt has increased. We've had the 2 very, very large projects, Lewis and Clark, $70 million. The event center, $115 million. So that's obviously going to make some of those debt ratios start to creep upward. So, and just to reiterate what Finance Department has told you, the bond rating agencies who objectively look at the city and our ability to pay debt, they have given us very high bond ratings. I think with Moody's, we have an AA2, and from Standard & Poor's, we have an AA minus, which is very high. So, so that's good. Those are the people that are looking at the ability of the city to repay its their debt obligations. And I'd like to point out to you, I just got this magazine last month, or last week, Governing Magazine. It's a monthly that goes out to local government professionals, very good magazine. And the cover story was about, do state and local leaders know enough about finance? And it was talking about the difficulty that city council members and county commissioners have to understand finances. It can be very, very complicated. And also a columnist had something, what's in your CAFR? And it was very interesting. I can make this available to council members or committee members if they want. I can give you a link or a hard copy. They're talking about that, what I referred to earlier, that management discussion and analysis, which is at the very beginning of the CAFR. That was required starting about 15 years ago, that the standard-setting body, the GASB, they said you have to include that now in your CAFR. It has to be this, why did your finances change? And it's normally written by the finance director or the finance officer for the citizens and the city council. And they said they don't know how often the city council members would read that, but they said the analysts, the credit analysts, they read the MD&A, the management discussion analysis, and they make some of their bond rating decisions based upon that. If they see a boilerplate MD&A, they know that, well, they haven't spent much time, looking at their finances. So they like to see a really well-done MD&A, and I think we do have one in Sioux Falls where I think they do, the finance department spends some time on that. And it's intended to be a plain language introduction to the financial statements. And so if you're interested in that, I'll give you the column. But I had no idea that the credit analysts looked at that and made decisions based on that management discussion analysis. So that's all I have. Tracy is here from the finance, and if you have questions for me or how we did these ratios, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions for Rich? Rex?
One thing that might have been nice to have had in here, Rich, is the other comparison cities, just who they were.
It's on the back page.
It's on the very last page. Yep.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah, there
Yep.
it is. I knew I was probably missing it. I didn't look that far,
And
sorry.
then we used the same, I think for Tracy, his last presentation, he used those cities,
Yep.
so we use the same cities. These, what I would call the usual suspects, Duluth and Cedar Rapids and Fargo and Sioux City and Rapid City, those kind of cities. So, yeah. And they're easy to find. They're normally people, or the governments put their CAFR on their website, so they're pretty easy to locate.
I have one other one here, just a second. I had a note. Okay, on page 4,
Yeah.
on the bottom, the graph that you have there, a .08
Yes.
for 2012 and that is the intergovernmental ratio.
Yes.
Does that mean that we're getting 8% of
Yeah.
income basically?
That'd
from-
be fair to say, yeah. You're in the governmental funds, which, it's going
So-
to be transit and CD and the general fund.
In the general funds,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. All I did is look in the general ledger or in the CAFR and just see what do we show for intergovernmental revenue, what do we show for total revenue, and just,
So if
yeah.
every other government funding source dried up on us, we'd have to make up 8% or so to stay exactly the way we are
Now,
right
is that
now.
likely to happen? No. But I know the council's talked about it. If, say, the transit funds,
Right.
once we exceed that benchmark, I think it was
200,000.
200,000, then that money starts to go away, and then we would have to fund that.
Yep.
So that could be something that could happen in the next 5 or 10 years, unless that threshold would change. But anyway. So obviously, if that happened, whatever programs were funded by that. For example, the health department has a dental clinic and a medical clinic, and I think they get a lot of federal money. We'd either have to find other sources or we wouldn't offer the program. I mean, that's what you have to do if that were the case. But it's good to know that number, though. I mean, certainly
that's an important number.
That number is those monies are always not guaranteed.
Quantify
Right.
that 8%?
What's that?
Can you quantify that 8%?
I could, but I didn't. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah.
I have one other one here, if I could, on page 4 again at the top. The debt service ratio, where we've got, we're at 0.8 now, or 8%, we're basically, again, we're using to pay off debt. Is that the way I would read that?
Yeah, I think that's the way you calculate, because you're looking at the, certainly your debt and comparing that to your,
Okay.
your expenditures.
I
Yeah.
see that it hasn't gone up from 2011, 12. Is that going to change dramatically in 13 because of payments we'll make for the 115,000? And if so, about how much, do you know?
I don't know if it'll dramatically go up. The CAFR should be out soon, right, next month, Tracy, I think it's coming out. And
So it will go up, but it's not going to be.
I would imagine it would go up. I don't think it would dramatically go up, because you spread the payments over
Yeah, well, 22 years.
22 years, yeah.
Tracy
Got a
Turbeck
memory.
with the finance office. Yeah, and you might be surprised at how little it will change. In fact, the 2014 budget for the governmental funds, I believe it was about 5 to 6% of our budget is budgeted for debt service payments. So it may actually go down as our overall budget increases at a faster rate than what our debt service payments do.
And plus, we're
Some are
taking
paid off.
some of those paid off
Right.
ones, and they'll stay, so they'll cross each other off, and,
That's-
okay.
Yeah, you
I
retire
understand.
some debt, and then you take on
Exactly.
new
Right,
debt, so. yeah.
Right.
Yep.
I was
That
just-
was part of the structure to the event center bonds, if you recall, that we stepped it up when some other bonds were being paid off.
Right, yeah. Pavilion and the convention center is the big ones.
Those are coming off this year as well.
Yep.
They paid
So,
off.
okay, thank you. I just curious.
Yeah, I don't want, yeah, it isn't like we're running up the credit card more and more. I mean, we're paying off debt as we incur new debt too. So it's like Tracy said, we tend to keep it fairly steady, so.
Any other questions? Tracy, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I know you're okay. Very good. I would take a motion to accept that report.
So moved.
Second.
Very good. That's been made. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. All right. Review of the internal audit annual report.
Yeah, we haven't done this in the past, but I know with the peer review coming up, anticipated later in the year, I think it's something they would expect to see, and it's probably just good communication with the audit committee and the council. I used examples from other cities, what they do, and this is typically, what they'll put in their annual report. We put down our mission and our vision, put down our staff, and that was as of 2013. Obviously, Danette had resigned in October, and now here, beginning in January, we have Jess on board, so we're full staff now. And as far as on page 2, the organizations we belong to, it's very useful for networking and for providing training opportunities. We belong to the Association of Local Government Auditors, the Institute of Internal Auditors, and the South Dakota CPA Society. And last year, I counted that we'd accumulated 133 hours of continuing education among the 3 staffers. And generally speaking, auditors need to get about 40 hours per year. So, you'd think with 3 auditors, you need to get about 120 or more. So we met that requirement. Again, just a reiteration of our independence organizationally and the org chart. It's very important where you put the audit function so that we have independence to report things as we see them. And the other part of that is objectivity, and that's more of a mental attitude, and we conduct annual training on that, and we document that training. That'd be something that peer review would probably be wanting to see. And also, when we start an audit, I have my auditors fill out a form saying they don't have any conflict of interest on this particular audit, they don't have any impairments to their independence or objectivity, and then we document that, put that in the work paper. So on every audit project, I don't want to put my staff auditors in a position where they have to, alter their judgment, or if they had a relationship with somebody in the auditing, the department they're auditing, and somebody would question that later. Like, for example, if I signed an auditor and people found out, well, your brother works at that department or that company, how could you do an objective audit? We never want to be put in that position, whether it's just by appearance or in fact. So. At the audit committee, down at the bottom, page 3, top of page 4, I just listed who's on the audit committee. You can see we have Jason his term is up, by the way, in May, and also Ann, so that's something for the committee to think about here. So, but we're fully, right now we have our full 7 people. And as far as the work accomplished, we got through the entire audit plan. Now with these 2 reports that we just discussed, they were on the 2013 audit plan. So we got through all of our audits that were on the audit plan. I thought that was pretty good considering that Danette had left in October, so we're short a little bit there. And I counted up that we had 14 audit recommendations from last year from the work that we did. And all of them were agreed to, which they were concurred with. Top of page 5 there, but just because management concurs, we still have to follow up and make sure that it happens, that it really does, whatever audit recommendation we came up with was addressed by management. So we'll do an annual report on that, the follow-up on audit recommendations. And then we just had, I think, 4 FAQs, frequently asked questions people have about internal audit. That's more for general information. I think the audit committee is probably aware of these, so be happy to take any questions on that.
Any questions for Rich? Okay, very good. Rich, do we need to accept this for the council? Or
I think so. And then I'll present it to the council at a future date. So
I'll move approval, Rolfing.
Second.
Very good, thank you. We have a motion to approve the internal audit annual report. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Thank you. Very good. So, Rich, now we have a travel request.
yeah, like I said, generally speaking, we have to maintain about 40 hours a year of continuing professional ed. We call it CPE. That's just kind of if you want to meet the standards or maintain certifications. It would be something that the peer review will look at. They'll look at your training file. I mean, are you sending people? I mean, are you documenting your training? So I'd like to send Kim Schroeder to the 2014 National Conference. It's in Tampa. It's in May. Estimated cost is on your sheet there, about $1,200. I've been to that, I think, 4 or 5 times. It's probably time for somebody else to go. So Kim volunteered, and we'd appreciate your approval of that. So,
And just to be clear, that would be in May versus
it'd be in May this year, yeah.
January or February this time. Just
It is in May in Florida. It's not in January, which would be nice.
any
Heard
questions?
she tried to get it there, though. They had that one there. She tried to get there.
Pushing for that peak travel season.
Yeah. No, they always have it in May, the national conference, wherever it's located. So it moves around.
I would move approval.
Okay. Any other? Arnie? Okay, thank you. Just before we vote, I think it's appropriate and necessary, and we're investing now in Kim and looking for great returns on that. So very good. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. That's been approved. Thank you. Now we have another travel request.
Yeah, this is Jess, and I found this course. I have been to this particular instructor, one of her courses before. She presented a workshop at 2 years ago at the national conference, and she's the gal that gives these courses is excellent instructor. I have a bunch of reviews of her course here. It's very hands-on training. She'll talk for a while, and then she'll break the class down into a small table, and they'll work on a case study. And it's a very effective way to learn. And this is geared towards beginning auditors, especially in government. It's ideal for the employee that's new to government auditing. It's to train new auditors on how to develop an audit finding, how to gather evidence, how to prepare the work papers, how to evaluate the internal controls. And I think it'd be good for Jess, to be in the office for a few months and start on an audit and then go to this course and then come back. I think it'll really accelerate her learning. And this is in Phoenix, Arizona in May. And then if that one were to be, if it was full, they have 35 spots, or if it were canceled or whatever, there's another one in Dallas in July. So I'm seeking a motion to approve this for May or July, whichever works out. It's the same course. So
moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, very good. That motion's been made. Just another comment. Did everybody get a chance to meet Jess? Has everybody? Everybody?
I don't think so. I don't know.
Yeah, see, I'm the
I think
only-
that some of the council members have, but not everybody, so, yeah.
Jess, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit to the other members and to the public?
My name is Jessica Bickett, and I started on the 21st.
And where did you come from, or what is your experience? Just
Lutheran Social Services, I worked in the Consumer Credit Counseling. That's now called the Center for Financial Resources. So.
okay.
She's a Sioux Falls product, right? Born and raised here, so.
Well, we always like those guys.
Southwest.
That's right, that's right.
All right, well, welcome, Jess, and I think it's important for her to get training as well, but I wouldn't want to send anybody to Dallas in July, so let's hope that the Phoenix one works out. Okay, we have a motion to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Very good. Jess, good luck. Open discussion. Rich, do you have something to start off?
Yeah, I think the next committee meeting is scheduled, I think it's April 16th, I believe. It's a Wednesday. So you check your calendars. The rest of the year is sort of up in the air. We have perhaps people coming off their term. We might have new council members, so I thought we'll just address the rest of the year at a later date. So.
No, there won't be, not for April, there won't be new ones, but
Okay.
Right.
The rest of the year, yeah. Usually we try to get the whole schedule out, early, but I think there's so much potential turnover on the audit committee. I think we just wait until after the April meeting and
Schedule the rest of the meeting.
schedule the rest of the meetings, yes.
Okay.
As far as I think I've spoken with the auditor from Eide Bailey. They were wrapping up their field work pretty much in finance. It's on schedule. They should have that CAFR out next month. It has to go up to peer and get a final blessing from the Auditor General's office, but usually it's not a big deal. So that probably the end of March, like it usually is, the annual financial reports will be out. And then usually the practice is to schedule a partner in charge or one of the partners from Eide Bailey to address the committee. If there was any issues that came up during the audit, any questions you might have about what happened during the audit. So that'll be for the next meeting if we can make that happen. So.
Anybody have anything else? The open discussion.
left.
Okay, seeing none, I guess I would take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Very good. Thanks for coming, guys. Thanks.